Hey everyone, welcome. My name is Dominic, working with Covalent Careers, and today we're doing a live YouTube event covering burnout and new grad rehab professions. And so I am super lucky enough to have three awesome people I've just been chatting with for a little bit and getting to know them. And I think they're going to have a lot of wise words for you to kind of learn from, and some resources to check out on your own if you're curious about more. So a quick intro about me if you haven't met me. I'm the publication director for new grad occupational therapy. I graduated from MGH IHP in Boston in 2017, and I've been working in acute care for about a year and a half. So I'll let these guys take it away.
My name is Erica. I am from Miami, Florida. I'm an occupational therapist. I graduated from NOAA Southeastern University in 2013, and I have been, for the majority of my time, in pediatrics, outpatient. And I was an adjunct professor for a little bit as well. And for the past few months, I've been taking some time to create some courses around burnout for some CEU companies.
My name is Alex. I'm the publication director for new grad speech therapy with Covalent Careers. I graduated from Towson University in Baltimore in 2012. I've been a clinician for 6 years now, and I have been working in the home health setting for the past 4 years.
And I'm Justin Johnson. I've been a therapist for going on 11 years now. I went to school at Central Michigan University, but I live in Colorado now. I've done everything under the sun except for pediatrics. I've done travel, I've done home health, acute care, small rural hospitals, big hospitals, in urban settings, and everything in between. And this is great. Thanks for putting this on, Dominic.
Yeah, of course. So before we get started, I thought maybe Erica could just give us a quick overview or definition of like what is burnout?
Yeah, for sure. So a lot of people will use burnout interchangeably with stress, but there's three specific things that make up burnout. So I like to think of it as the three ingredients. So one of them is emotional exhaustion, followed by cynicism or feeling distant or this depersonalization from work or your profession as a whole. And lastly, it's decreased efficacy or decreased feelings of competency in your work. So it's these three things combined that uniquely make up burnout. And the thing with burnout is that it's job specific. So it is these feelings of the exhaustion, cynicism, and decreased efficacy as it pertains to your job.
Wow, that's awesome. Thanks. Anybody want to add anything?
I learned something new. I did not know that, because I'll just say I'm stressed out. But now when you read those three things, I'm like, yes, yes, and yes.
Yeah, and I think Erica touched on a really good point, that those are the three ingredients, and you don't necessarily have to have all three to be burnt out. Mm-hmm. But if you're studying this kind of stuff, you do need to measure those three things, because mm-hmm. stress is stress. But if you can measure you can measure burnout, and so that's a really key ingredient for if you're trying to determine, am I just stressed or am I burnt out? So, yep.
Justin, how would you say burnout's different than depression or just simply hating your job?
Well, yeah, they get into a very gray area there, don't they? Because there's so many factors that go into being burnout, being depressed, or being stressed. And all those things can commingle. And often they do, right? Everybody who's lived a number of years on this earth knows that they do commingle. I think that I'll just kind of reiterate what Erica said, emotional exhaustion, right? Are you emotionally overextended? And this is pertaining to work now, right? This isn't pertaining to home life. This is kind of pertaining to work. Are you feeling depersonalization from your work? Do you not care about your patients' outcomes? Do you not care about your patients or your coworkers? You've really backed yourself off from caring about them, right? So that'd be the number two, which is a little bit different than depression or being stressed. And then number three, are you feeling personal accomplishment in your work that you do, or you're not feeling that anymore? So if you can kind of tease out those three things, then you can determine, oh, I am feeling burned down, check, check, check. Or I have stress, and it's maybe from my family or my kids or my wife or my spouse or whatnot. But these are really pertaining to work.
Yeah, and I would like to add to Justin, in my personal experience of going through burnout, I like to think of the analogy of, when you go to the beach and you have your chair and your umbrella and you have it on this like on the sand, and then you go in the water and you're talking and you're distracted, and then like let's say like an hour passes by and you look back to the shore and you've completely drifted. You can't locate your stuff. And I like to think of burnout as the same way, that in my case, in my experience, it happens so slowly over time. And I wasn't really aware of like the little things that added up each day until like it was almost not too late, but until like I just like had a complete breakdown and I realized, wow, so much has happened. These little things added up and I didn't quite put together the science. And it kind of just became my new normal at work, and that was the really scary thing until like I was able to step out of myself and like take a look at the situation.
Yeah, I think I really enjoy that analogy because I feel like I'm going through burnout at work right now. And it happens, I would say, like maybe 1, 2, 3 times a year. And I never know when it's coming. But now looking back, you see the little things that maybe are causing the burnout, whether it's, I don't want to say self-imposed, or from external factors going on within your career that can add to that maybe you think, well, I can handle it, I've done it before and I can handle it, but things shift within our personal lives as well that are different at times with our careers. And maybe you can't handle as much as you thought, or, the caseload is heavy or the workload is heavy. So I really resonate with that analogy, from the beach to looking in the water and, where am I? Because I think it is very common and can happen pretty quickly for new grads, because they may not know those signs and all of a sudden are like, hey, what's going on? Where am I?
Yep. Alex, thanks for touching on new grads. I appreciate it, because I think I've been working, like I said, for 1.5 years, and some of the stuff we've been talking about, it's like, yeah, you're right. I am kind of like losing interest in my patient outcomes, whether if they go home or sniff, like sometimes it's hard to get excited about some sort of things like that. Mm-hmm. So Alex, who would you say is susceptible to burnout? Would you say it's new grads? Would you say it's experienced therapists? Is it a mix? Both? Neither?
I think it's a mix. The first thing that popped into my mind are speech pathologists who are covering various settings. So whether, you're a pediatric-based speech pathologist who's working in 4 different schools, or you're covering like 6 different nursing homes, which I've been in that position. So I think therapists who have the responsibility for multiple settings on top of being the only therapist, they're really susceptible to burnout, as well as new grads, because, you don't know what you don't know, right? So I think it can just kind of happen, and you may think, oh my goodness, why did I choose speech? I'm horrible at this. I don't like it anymore. But you don't know that it's not necessarily you, and it's not necessarily that you're not a good fit for speech pathology or vice versa. It's just that, hey, you're completely new to this entire career, and you're going to need a little bit of time to acclimate to the demands of your job and to realize, hey, I have to say no to this, or maybe I have to clock out early, which is, I think, really scary for new grads to think about telling a supervisor or someone new that I can't do this or I won't do this.
Yeah, according to this one study I found on occupational therapists, and these are, very like small studies, but there was this one study of OTs I think in Canada, and they found that OTs had between 6 to 10 years of experience experienced the most burnout, and the researchers were estimating, maybe they experienced burnout because the older therapists or the therapists that have had more experience have learned greater adapting mechanisms. So kind of like what Alex said, like when you're newer, and even after between 6 to 10 years, like you're not a new grad anymore, but it's like knowing when you should speak up about something. And the climate at work can really predict that. If there's like a lot of corrosive energy, or if there's and you're in a situation where like the pace is just really fast, but it's negative, then it's going to skew how you view everything, how you approach things, because you might feel like although what you are feeling is reasonable, or like you can justify like the workload is just so exhausting, or maybe you have decreased autonomy at work or whatever it is. But, I think your environment, especially when you're newer, it's going to really like predict how you can approach or how you handle these outcomes.
Yeah, I'll just add a couple of things to that, if you don't mind. I think it's important for people who are new grads. So I'm going to say 0 to 3 years, 4 years maybe, is you're going to get stressed and you're going to want to quit and you're going to want to do a bunch of other things. There's going to be lots of other things going on in your life. It's important to recognize that your first job is not the entire world. It's important to recognize that maybe that one job isn't a good fit for you. Maybe pediatrics isn't a good fit. Maybe the outpatient clinic isn't a good fit. And some of the external stressors like documentation and billing and some of those ethical things, dilemmas that you got to deal with, are helped a lot by having a good mentor or a good social support system like Covalent Careers provides. They got all these articles on it that you can read, and you can contact the authors and talk to them if you want to. So don't jump ship because you think you're burned out in the first 3 years. You got to give it a try. And if you are feeling these types of things that we're talking about, then it's definitely time to kind of move forward and see what you can do about it.
Do you guys' workplace do anything to help employees? Like, I think there's like an employee assistant program like through the hospital I work at to, like, if I wanted to, or if I need to talk to someone, and it's free, of course, but just thinking like in terms of my department, we have like an awesome close group of individuals. So there's no like toxic or like negative energy, but we do like, every time we get together a month, we just ask like, how's it going? And someone might say like, hey, I'm on the inpatient cancer center this past couple months, and like it's been really stressful and really sad. I'm not sure if I can do it for much longer. Can someone flip flop, and can I go to ortho? And we do sort of things like that. Does anyone else have that ability, or do you guys do that? Have you had it?
Well, that's really important that you brought that up, and that's great that you have that, because from some of the research I've been looking at, burnout is more of sometimes it's more regarded as a social phenomenon than it is an individual one, and a lot of factors that contribute to burnout are more work related than personal factors. So when you bring in that social support, it really can, in my personal experience too, like make or break how your burnout. And that social support is like meeting monthly or bi-weekly is more important than just meeting once a year with your boss and going over your performance. That's not necessarily like the support that you need on a regular basis. So personally speaking, I haven't, because I'm taking a break from clinical care, I haven't had that experience formally, but informally, just kind of checking in with people and having people that you trust at work, making a proactive effort to be social or to build a positive social support is really helpful, because you might, go to someone for advice that has perhaps less experience if you trust and like them more, versus someone that has more experience, but that, has like negative qualities. So I think like that social support is a crucial component.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Alex. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I work for a pretty large hospital system. So we have bi-weekly meetings with our team. There's about 10 to 13 teams across like Pennsylvania covering for home health care. So in terms of like strategies for burnout and things like that, it can be difficult if you work in a larger setting to kind of connect with those people if you don't make the effort. So I would say a good tip for new grads is don't be afraid to get to know your coworkers, and not just people within your discipline. Get to know, nurses, PTs, OTs, other speech pathologists, social worker, and get to talk to your manager outside of just a staff meeting, because they're going to be one of your biggest advocates, especially if you are feeling burned out. And you need to take a personal day, or maybe your workload is too hard or too heavy and you need to offset some of that to maybe a PRN or another therapist, you have to feel comfortable going to your manager about that. So I think it's really important to get to know your coworkers and advocate for yourself as well, you know, when you are feeling that burnout.
I like what you said about making friends with your nurses or social workers or whoever, because yes. I know when I like walk around the hospital all day that whatever floor I might go to for patients, I know I'm going to at least know one nurse or two nurses and have like a familiar face. And if I don't know something, or like where do they keep the socks on this floor, there's always like a friend I can go and ask, and so things like that. It's kind of like Scrubs, like where they being friends with the janitor is like vastly, like super important, and you never know when you might need that.
Yeah. And just imagine if the situation was reversed, like if there were as many physical therapists as there are nurses, like if it was just a PT building or just a speech building and only like 5 nurses came in every now and then, you know, you would feel really kind of hurt or upset if they didn't know your name or who you were or what your job was.
Right.
So I think sometimes as therapists, we tend to get really offended when other disciplines like, oh, you don't know what I do, or you don't know my name, but you know,
every day.
Yeah. So it's a two-way street. You know, I think we all have to make the effort because it's about our patients, you know.
So I asked earlier if you guys thought, or if you had experiences where your hospital has like helped you with things, but we have a question from Matt in the chat, and he says, curious to hear if you think that a company with a strong mission builds your resilience for working hard or long hours. Basically, if a company has values aligned with yours, is it less likely that you'll feel burned out versus a company that lacks that strong mission that aligns with yours? Does that affect your opinion on burning out? I think what he's saying, like, are you willing to work harder or longer hours if you have a company where your values are aligned, or does it affect you?
I can take a shot at that one, Dominic.
Yeah, go for it.
People don't usually quit businesses; they quit their managers. So what you'll do for your manager, so you're playing sports, right? What you'll do for your coach is a lot more important than what you'll do for the owner of that team, right? So with this, that's a great question. Every business has pretty much the same mission statement in healthcare: improve lives, or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
But will you go to bat for your manager? Will they stay over and help you out if you need it? Do they let you come into their office, eat their candy, down if you need to? That's who you're, you know, go an extra mile for usually, and your patients. So I would probably say no to the question. It's usually not about the organization. It's about more your team and who you're working for directly and who you have personal interaction with.
I like that. That's a really good answer.
Yeah, like going off of what he said, I agree 100% because like you don't leave your job, like you leave your employer, and the greater you align, like for example, the greater your values align with the values of the team you're working with, then you're going to find your work more meaningful. But if there's a disconnect and whatever it may be, it is that they're asking of you or how they operate, and you feel that disconnect within your team and from what your supervisor or your boss is asking you, it's going to cause a strain. And what happens is that strain can lead to burnout because it's exhausting to when you're kind of facing this conflict, whatever it may be in your value system or their value system. And what I like to think of is that, you know, work culture or the organization's like their culture is imposed, but it's really about the community, what the living breathing community that you're in. How does that affect you? Is there carryover? You know, do they practice what they preach? Is there integrity? And I found that my values didn't necessarily align with what was being asked of me to do in a certain case years ago. So that created so much tension, strain, presenteeism, the whole thing with what burnout, all the outcomes of burnout. So I think that's really important to have that match.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I kind of similarly to what everyone else has said, I've worked for companies where they had a really strong mission and some who maybe didn't. And to me as a clinician, I always want to work the hardest that I can for my patients, you know, whether the company is screaming that from the mountaintops or they're not at all. So I think in terms of dealing with burnout, you really have to have your own sense of kind of like your own radar in terms of, you know, is this too much for me or is it not? But also really tapping into those people at your job if maybe the mission isn't so strong or you're not aligned with it, those people in your job who are kind of on the same wavelength as you, so you do have that support.
Alex, do you think you, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, can I just add one more thing? And it kind of talks about a few of these things. New grads are inherently at a disadvantage when picking their first or second jobs. You don't have that experience yet as a clinician. Mm-hmm. So when you're going into the interview and you're asking these managers or whoever, how is the culture here? You're inherently at a disadvantage because you don't know the questions to ask, and you don't know what a great, you know, community, a great rehab team working with the doctors is like. So you just got to do it and work, and then you'll get a feel for it.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Yeah, I'm lucky enough where at my first job, I work with like a great company. Everyone like is well respected in the rehab and we all work together nicely. So now I know what to look for if I ever leave. Yeah. My first question, like I know what to ask, because I think I can work with any sort of patient, but it's the team I'm kind of working with or that I'll kind of choose on. Alex, what I was going to ask you is you kind of got close to it, but I want to learn more is like, you were kind of talking about like how do you figure out if you are burning out, and I wonder if you could touch more on that. And then how do you escape it? Like, what do you guys do to relieve your stress? You mentioned earlier you're going on vacation to a beach house. So
yes, yes, I'm looking very much forward to it this weekend. So personally for me, I know when I'm getting burnt out is when I start letting little things slip that usually I'm really on top of. I like to get most of my documentation done in the house or in my car before I go to see my next patient. I like to prep for my new evaluations before I see them. So when those things start to slip, when I maybe start forgetting names, I'm a little bit lazy with my scheduling, I'm pushing my documentation until the next morning instead of finishing it when I get home. I call into meetings instead of going in person. Just little things that really are not characteristic of myself as a clinician. When I get home and I just feel the weight of everything, I get really affected by what my patients are going through. And it's hard, you know, you are, you know, interacting with people on a daily basis who are going through some pretty tough times. And sometimes it's hard to separate that, but I know when I start to really latch onto it and it really affects me that, you know, I'm turning the corner of burnout. So I usually like to get away. And usually this is not, I don't want to say horrible, but when I even travel on weekends, I will bring my work computer with me and my work phone. So this weekend I am leaving the computer and I'm leaving the phone. So really kind of detaching from work in and of itself and just stepping away and trying to just refresh and reset is really what helps me to get back on track after burnout.
Anyone else want to share? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Going off of what you said, Alex, you know, the short, you know, like the short getaways are really helpful, just like maintenance, that are easier to do versus like one big vacation once a year, although that is nice and you could have both, why not? But you know, it's the shorter getaways really helped to replenish. So I'm really proud of you that you're not taking your work stuff with you.
Yes.
But there's, you know, like when it comes to how do you solve this problem, and I think for everyone it's so different because on one end, for one person it could be more of the person directed interventions, and then for someone else it's more of a work directed interventions. So like for yourself personally, what helped me in my long recovery from burnout was just being aware and developing awareness and meditating. So meditating, mindfulness really is like my medicine every day, just like I drink water, I eat, exercise, I meditate. So for me, that helped. And, you know, in terms of work-directed interventions, it could be, you know, having or how you can, with your other coworkers, cultivate community, cultivate that social support. Can you adapt or modify some of your workload maybe it takes a little bit more flexibility in your schedule to accommodate for picking up the kids, or, there's different things at work too. So it's kind of like playing detective. Like, what do I need? Do I need to take care of myself or that? And also, take a look at how my well-being is while I'm at work.
Yeah, you guys touch on some really good things. I think one thing to remember is if your work is unethical or they're doing something illegal, that's a whole different situation. I've been in a couple of those on travel assignments, and I obviously didn't renew the contract. So that's number one. If it's unethical, if you know it in your soul that it's unethical, then you either need to tell them that it's not, and if they don't change it, you need to leave. And if it's illegal, you need to report it and leave. Usually, you guys are talking a little bit about vacations and stuff. One book that I'd recommend to everybody listening is The Miracle Morning. It's a really great book. It's a really quick read too. It goes through some things in the morning that I can do to keep your energy up and that type of thing. But you got to find your de-stressors, just like you guys are talking about, little vacations. Maybe your kids or your dog de-stress you. If you can, try to write down what you're stressed out about. Try to write down what you're feeling stressed out about, or what's going wrong at work. Because writing stuff down lets you reflect on it, right? So that's like a personal thing you can do. You don't have to show anybody, or you can talk about it with a mentor or a coach, or you can give me a call, talk to you about it. And then the last thing is, don't bring your patient's problems home with you. If you can't detach your brain from your patients, that's something that you need to really work on, because your patients with strokes aren't coming home with you. You're going home to your loved ones to do your thing. And as long as you can detach from that and say, okay, now I'm home, I'm detached, I'll work with them when I'm there, that's a really big benefit to you and avoiding burnout.
I want to add one more thing to what Justin was saying about the not tolerating illegal or unethical things. But on that same idea, if harassment or bullying, that's also a big thing, and I did experience both. And that mediates the relationship, between you and burnout. And there's studies on workplace bullying amongst nurses, and how nurses that experience the bullying, they're more likely to be burnt out. So that, again, it's a whole other situation. But, considering are you in a situation where there's just like a lot of toxicity, or is it bullying, or like, what does that look like? Or is it passive aggressiveness? Because as a girl, as a woman, I know that can be a form of bullying when you're passive aggressive, or you leave someone out, or, it can look like just insufficient social, emotional rewards at work, whether that's from a supervisor that's leaving you out, or amongst coworkers. So you can do all the resilience and mindfulness in the world, and I'm a huge advocate of that, but also taking a look at, is that affecting me? Is that something that maybe I'm seeing someone else getting bullied? And I just think that's really important to think about as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. We have a couple of comments over here. Justin, you got some kudos. Alexis Joel, Miracle Morning is fantastic, and here to ethics, non-negotiable to exit the environment. So it sounds like you have a new fan. And then Brett asked a question, which Justin, I think you'll do a good job of kind of fielding to get us going. Are there specific indicators that new grads can look for during the interview process that are red flags culture-wise?
Yes. Ask what productivity is, number one.
Yes.
If it's 100%, get up and walk out.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Number two is, don't just talk to the manager. You want to talk to the workers there, and you don't want to talk to them when the manager's around. Say, oh, hey, can I chat with them for a few minutes? And if they say no, red flag. Okay. If you talk to the manager and say, hey, can I eat lunch with you guys? Or, I'll bring you guys in coffee or something, or however it works out. If they won't let you get with the workers, then that's a big red flag. Also, if you can tell they're not being honest with you about workload, patients, about the health of the company, then usually you can tell that when somebody's not telling you the whole truth. That's a big red flag. And I would maybe talk it over with a more experienced person, or maybe find another person to talk to in that company and say, what's going on here? Because you can kind of smell when things are fishy, you know?
Those are awesome tips.
You can call me too, and I'll talk to you about it.
I would say too, if this is your first interview or like one of your first jobs out of grad school, don't feel pressure to take the position just because you really need a job and it's going to be the first job you're going to have. I did that. Luckily, it worked out in the beginning. It was not a great environment in the end. So do not feel pressure to take a position just because it's the only position in front of you right now. Especially if they're making you feel kind of iffy, kind of like Justin said, if they're being shady or walking around, giving you direct answers about things that are really important, with your caseload, productivity, time off, weekends, really, really important things that you need to know before you take a position.
Yeah, it's a two-way interview. You're also interviewing them, and exactly what you said, don't be afraid to say no, or, don't jump on the first job offer you have just because it's the first job offer you have. And I think we're so eager when we graduate, and going off of that, setting boundaries. If you don't set boundaries and right away, and that takes time. That took a lot of time for me to feel comfortable saying no to certain things and knowing that it wasn't going to jeopardize my job, but it wasn't knowing what I could say no to and still like be happy and benefit everyone. I think that takes a lot of, trial and error and experience, but setting boundaries is a big one.
Alexis left another comment, and essentially I'm just going to paraphrase, but just to remember, you're interviewing the company to make sure it's the right fit for you, not just interviewing to get the position, which I think is something a lot of people don't think about. My favorite part about my job is I get to help a lot of people get into OT school, or like they ask a lot of questions, and I always tell them, you're like, go to the interview and go where you get accepted, but also make sure it's a good fit for you, because it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, and it's like a long 3 years. It sucks. So make sure it's at least like a place you're happy at or enjoy. Guys, go ahead, Alex.
I was going to say, I just thought of something that you said before. If your company does anything to help burnout, in our morning meetings, before we start our meeting, we would turn the lights off and do a guided meditation. And then our hospital does offer yoga to clinicians. Nice. Yeah. So those are two things that I know that they try to help facilitate the burnout. It doesn't always work, but they are, there are things in place. And don't be afraid to start that at your own job. Talk to your manager or your rehab director, or even if you can't have it at your facility or wherever you work, touching base with your support group and saying, hey, would you guys want to go to a yoga class after work, or would you want to, meditate before, this meeting starts, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I like the idea after work. It's hard because if you're doing 45 minutes of yoga during the middle of the day, who's able to go to that? It's kind of like the suits that sit at a desk, not the clinicians running around who get 20 minutes to eat and document at the same time. So we're getting cut short on time. Do you guys mind sharing like one last tip on how you can burn out, and then maybe share like contact info, social media, personal websites, or anything that people can get a hold of you at?
Yeah,
Justin,
for sure.
You want to go first?
Yeah, for sure. So the number one thing to remember, guys, is mainly for new grads, but this is for anybody. And really, most healthcare professions is you're not alone. Like, you're not the only one going through this. I know you got student loans. I know you got a mortgage. I know you got stuff going on, but you're not the only one. And so, doing these little groups and reading and talking about it with others, if you ever need, just to let stuff go, you got to do that stuff. You're not alone. We're all going through this. Anybody can get me at jmjohnsondpt@gmail.com or at jmjohnsonco@gmail.com. If you want to shoot me anything or you need book recommendations, I'm pretty good for that. And these three people are actually really good at it too. So.
Yeah, he has a lot of book. Oh, no, go ahead, Alex. Okay. Yeah, he has a lot of good book recommendations. I want to hear more of yours. But my biggest thing is, and I ask this a lot on my podcast, because I have a podcast called Burnout to Lit Up. And what is your most, when you can imagine your most thriving self, like what does that look like? And not that every day is going to be magical, but how does your overall life look like? Are you going to work with a purpose? Are you in the right setting? Are you taking care of yourself personally? It wasn't until after I burnt out, until after I went through so much, that I started to take care of myself and read personal development books and actually learn how to advocate for myself at work and how to be a better person mentally, spiritually, emotionally. So take care of yourself, like as much as you can every day, and take care of your social support groups, take care of, you know, really water every part of your life that you want to grow. And then engage in that personal development and go to, and professional development as well. You know, take, like, you graduate and you go to work, but like, you know, in healthcare, we're not just going to work and coming back home, even though in the day-to-day it looks like that, but overall, like, how are you growing professionally? So you can find me at, well, you can listen to the Burnout podcast. That's where I'm at every single week. I love podcasting. And you can also find me on Instagram, joy.energy.time, or shoot me an email at Erica, ERIKA, at joyenergytime.com.
Nice, thanks. How about you, Alex?
My tip would be, don't be afraid to advocate for yourself. Don't be afraid to ask for a day off. Don't feel pressure to see every single patient and every single minute, second of your schedule is filled out. Don't be afraid to say no for fear of, you know, being fired or losing for your job, because your personal well-being and your mental well-being is so important, because we can't do our jobs if that's not at its best, right? So you can shoot me an email at alex@covalentcareers.com, and you can follow along with us at New Grad Speech Therapy on Instagram.
Nice, thanks, guys. I know I really appreciate you guys hopping on. I know I learned a lot, and I'm kind of looking forward to the holidays to take some time off, but hopefully I can use some of the tools I learned now so I can make it more than 18 months without feeling burned out or having that compassion fatigue. For any of you guys that aren't watching live, I will leave links to more resources that Covalent Careers offers, along with maybe some links back to these guys' contact info. So if you didn't catch that, don't worry about it. You don't have to write it down. I'll put a link down on the bottom. Well, thanks again, guys. Hopefully we can do this again. It was really nice to get together and chat with you guys in person.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Have a great day. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Happy holidays.
Thank you. Yeah.